are. Cairo Mafia got the Dom, and we have he might have cheated on his Italian genetics test.
How you doing?
Yeah, you
Hey,
know
hey.
it. But hey, we're thrilled today because, like I said on my interview last time with you, Miles, I think here's the three people that just don't talk about retention and lifestyle, but actually teach it and it works.
For
Yeah,
sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
right. So you have a fascinating story. Very principled dude, man. Old school chiropractic philosophy. Pours out of you. Probably more passionate about it today than you were 3 decades ago. So
yeah, yeah.
Well,
we're
the story of chiropractic is what got me into chiropractic. And, there's this, I don't know, just this sense that we have such a message to share. And I think the world's ready for it. And they've probably been ready, but I think it's never been more ready than now. And
Agreed.
it's the truth. What we share it's a truth message. And
Yes.
that's,
well.
it
Here's the
resonates
thing.
with me, whether it was chiropractic or any other subject. When it's the truth of that subject, it resonates with me as a person. And, that's why I resonated with so well.
Yes.
Well, and I think we're all three of us, and the whole chiropractic profession, hopefully, we're truth seekers. And I think you're right. Not only has the general public always been ready, but now they're searching.
Yeah.
Now they're searching. It's like now is the time, man. We've been waiting 3 fucking decades
Yes.
for the general public to be
Yes.
finally seeking us.
Yes.
Now's when your message has to be the most pure.
For
Yep.
sure. Authenticity, man. And again, that's what resonates with people today. People are see through BS, like their BS meters are like beep, 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 right? So to have a natural sense of authenticity and you're not pulling the wool over people's eyes and just being truthful, people see it. And I think that's one of the reasons people resonate with it as well.
Absolutely. So tell us how you got into it, man. Tell us your
So,
story.
thanks for asking. And by the way, thanks guys for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And you guys are, giants in the profession, and it's an honor to be here.
Even though
How
we're
did I
not
get into
that
it?
tall
So,
because we're Italian.
yeah. It's a fun, I was called to serve as a chiropractor in some way, and that is I was studying to be an engineer. We were just talking about prior to recording here, talking about being at San Diego State back in the day, in the early 80s. And I was there as well. I was studying to be an engineer. And one day I woke up in my senior year of engineering and I'm like, man, I'm not following the path I'm meant to be on. I could just feel it in my bones. Like, let me back up. I like the work of engineering. I like that thinking style. I like what it does, but I just knew in my heart of hearts, it wasn't what I was meant to do. It wasn't what I was put on this earth to do. I'm sure you guys know engineers, and most engineers are pretty dry, analytical people. They're not social. They're not interacting with people. Right. It's a whole different species, right? And
Yeah.
it
Right.
just wasn't my people. And I realized, like, as much as I like the work, I couldn't see myself doing it for a career. And I was like, I got to figure something out. And, we are just talking about being in San Diego. To paint a picture, what I did is I literally left class my senior year, went to the beach, Pacific Beach. I know you know where I'm talking about, Crystal Pier.
Yeah.
Hung out by the beach down there, got a pad of paper out. Here I'm a young 20-year-old punk kid. And I started writing on a pad of paper. And I just was asking myself, like, what do I want in life? How do I want to live my life? What's important to me? And I just started kind of setting out a vision of what I wanted to do, of who I wanted to be. And I spent the whole afternoon writing, and I filled probably a dozen pages of paper, kind of just like putting to paper, how do I want my life to be? If I don't want to be an engineer, like where I don't want to be this lost kid. And I got some clarity around where I wanted. I didn't suddenly
Now,
be saying I wanted
question
to be a
real
chiropractor.
quick. Do you still
Huh?
have those? Do you still have
I
those?
don't. I wish I did. I don't
Oh
know.
man,
I've
can you
looked.
imagine? You're like, God, look at my grammar, man. I didn't know anything back then.
Probably my penmanship was a lot cleaner back then too.
Yeah.
But it dawned on me um, that certainly I didn't want to be an engineer, and I kind of got a real clarity around what I want to do. Now, I wasn't, oh my God, I'm gonna be a chiropractor. That's not what happened. What happened was I had been visiting a chiropractor since I was 12 years old after I injured my neck diving into a pool in upstate New Jersey. And I dug, visiting some family and dove into a pool and hurt my neck and ended up seeing a chiropractor after about 3 weeks of suffering with a crick neck and had a great experience and been seeing a chiropractor occasionally ever since then.
Okay, so hang on
So
a sec.
yeah.
Sorry. So now it's like, hey man, I have tons of neck injuries. My parents never took me to a chiropractor, so how did they even know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my parents didn't take me to the chiropractor. It just so happened I have a brother-in-law who was studying to be a chiropractor at Life.
Okay.
Mm.
And how did he become a chiropractor? Well, he had a recovery from a car accident. Like his entry in the chiropractic was um, he was a history teacher. He owned movie theaters. Like this was a late, second, third career type thing. And he had an injury and he was like, hey, I should become a chiropractor. And he became one. So he talked to my parents about you should bring Miles to a chiropractor. And after about 3 weeks of them going, no, 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 they finally took me to a chiropractor, me suffering for 3 weeks. And I still remember, the adjustment, the pop, the cervical collar the chiropractor put me on to wear to school. And but that was my first experience with chiropractic. Nothing to do with
Now
health.
being a parent, now it's like, okay, what really happened? God, kids, shut up. Fine.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
okay,
What's funny is
stop.
when that happened, I was visiting family in I think it was upstate New York or New Jersey, and my parents had dropped me off with these cousins, and they were traveling around. So for a week, I'm laying on their sofa, rubbing Bengay on my neck, and just in misery for the whole week. My parents are traveling around. Anyway, fast forwarding back to this point in time in college, and I was visiting my chiropractor at the time. And when I visited them, I was kind of looking at it. I didn't go there with this reason, but suddenly, after having this clear vision of how I wanted to live my life, it dawned on me like this chiropractor is living my vision. Like he's actually living what I just got done writing about in my notebook. And it dawned on me like, well, maybe I should check this chiropractic thing out. And I wasn't even aware what chiropractic was all about, other than I was doing it for pain relief, that kind of thing. So I went back to San Diego State. Literally, I went back to the school and I got a book on healthcare. And in that book, there was a section on chiropractic. And in that section on chiropractic, it talked about the nervous system and how the nervous system was the master control system of the body, and that the nervous system controlled and regulated everything, and that the interference of that nervous system created disease in the body, and that resulted in the breakdown. And it just talked about this stuff, and
so
this
connected talked about the principle.
It talked about the principle of the nervous system, and that resonated with me. And I'll tell you why it resonated with me. I was studying to be an electrical engineer, right? And if you don't know anything about electrical engineering, it's kind of like what chiropractic is. It's all about electricity going through the body. It just kind of connected. I'm like, wait a second. There's this whole notion that there's an electrical system of the body that controls and coordinates everything. And if that interference to that, it just creates dis-ease, and removing that interference lets the body work better. And I'm like, well, holy shit, I can apply all my engineering knowledge to a new field. And literally overnight, I went back to my apartment.
Changed all your classes.
I literally went back to my apartment and told my girlfriend, my wife now, but my girlfriend back then, saying, what do you think about me leaving engineering and become a chiropractor? And she flipped out because I'm ready to graduate soon as an engineer. And then to her credit, she said, well, if that's what you want to do, then let's do it. And I immediately dropped out all of my engineering and crashed a few courses that I needed to get for some undergraduate. And we literally went from living in San Diego and packed up our bags, moved up to Huntington Beach. And I applied to LACC and got in LACC and then went, and that was the story. That's what got me into it. Was literally reading a passage about the nervous system is what got me excited about chiropractic. And I didn't know anything about philosophy or no philosophy. I went to LACC, and I will say, some people ask me about going to like a more medically oriented chiropractic school or not a philosophical school. And I'm thrilled I went to the school I went to, because to me, where you get strong in your philosophy is in the ability to defend your philosophy. It's not that you're just being spoon-fed it and accepting it like dogma. Like you're challenged and you're able to have conversations and debate your points. That's where you get stronger. And I left LACC, and I think many of my college students, I think of people like Dave Jackson, Bill DeMoss, like we're all people that are philosophically driven chiropractors, and we all went to LACC, and I come out of there feeling the sense of like, I feel really strong in being able to defend my position, because I had numerous debates with clinicians, etc. And you could see, hear my voice today, to this day, 30 years later, still talking the same way.
So they didn't teach the principle. I mean, shit,
No.
I graduated a couple years before you, and right then they were starting to not allow the word subluxation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I found a little bit about that studying AK. But where did you find the principle in school?
Yeah, that's a good question. So just reading those passages initially was just like, I went into school already thinking chiropractic's about the nervous system. I went into it.
Yeah.
Where I got it kind of re-dipped was, I'll remember my first term of school, I went to a Parker seminar, and I was we had about 120 kids in my class. Kids, think about it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I was the only one that went. And I remember hearing Jim Parker. That was my first experience with it. And then I was also given by the chiropractor, he gave me tapes of 𝐾𝐨𝐫𝐠. He gave me tapes of Larry Markson, old cassette tapes. Uh, who else did he give me? He gave me some of the old names of, Fred Barge. Listened to, I got the book 𝐬𝐮�ن𝐬𝐜, and read and listened. And then my first kind of in-person real philosophy beyond just kind of the practice management side of things as well was going to hear Ron Oberstein. He used to give talks in his office back in the day. Yeah. Ron Oberstein, you guys know from Life West, the president. He used to practice in San Diego. In fact, he gave my daughter Mariah, who's now 32, her first adjustment when she was 4 days old. We took her to Ron. But Ron used to do his Power Zone, his philosophy talks at his office. I think it was either once a month, or I think it was once a month. And we used to drive down from LACC and go listen to him in his office. So that's just kind of getting exposed to people preaching the message, and from various places, as well as I just listen to cassette tapes all the time. It was always listening.
So now you're at LACC, man, and you're a principal guy from the beginning. You understood the principle.
Yeah, for sure.
That was like swimming upstream, being able to sit through class, or all the other kids that bought into the academia of LACC.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I come from an engineering background, so I'm very into the academia. I'm very into the science. I'm very into the knowledge side of things. I'm not pushing. It's not one or the other. I look at kind of like the way people say science and religion don't go together. I think they go together. Like I think there's a sense that how could you not believe in a God if you really understand the science? Like, how could you not believe in the principle if you really understand chiropractic? Like, they go hand in hand when you look at it. And so to me, it was like two sides of the same coin to me.
Yeah. So now let's ask Joe, man. Joe, were you a front row guy or a back row guy? They're New York Italian. Were you front row or back row?
In class?
Yeah.
50-50. If I hated the class, if it was something I really struggled with, I'd have to sit in front.
Really?
Then I wouldn't pay attention. I'd screw around in the back. But if it was something
that was
easy,
the whole
it came
point,
easy then.
Was to sit in the back and screw around. I never sat in the front row, ever, not even one time.
Yeah. How to get an A. There was a book I read a long time ago. It was How to Get an A. And rule number one was sitting in the front because you wouldn't get distracted. So,
well, I will say, because Joe has spoken at a number of our seminars, elite seminars, he's always in the front row taking notes.
I'm always sitting in the front. Yeah.
I think you take more notes, as accomplished and, I will say humble. You take more notes than most people, man.
Because I realize the more I know, the less I know. So that's why.
Exactly.
It's funny you bring up notes. When I was in school, leaving engineering and going to chiropractic, it's like very different subject matter, right? You study it very differently. A lot of memorization in chiropractic. In engineering, it's not a lot of memorization. It's a lot of conceptual stuff. So it's a very different way of studying. So when I went to chiropractic school, I was like, I got to study differently than I did in engineering. And one of the things I did is I'm going to go buy a computer. And back then I'm talking about the little Mac Classic little computer. And I'm going to type out my notes each day so that that's a good way for me to learn, is just take my handwritten notes, type them out, then read them and study them. And that's how, because I'm not good at memorization at all. I struggle with it. And anyways, I ended up doing notes so well that I ended up being the note taker for class that you bring up. And by the time I graduated, I'll tell a funny story. By the time I graduated, I did about $40,000 of note of sales by the time I graduated.
Wow, there you go.
So it was kind of a fun little side project.
Now I was
doing a side gig back before there were side gigs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's like you though. Because I lived in Huntington Beach going to school, by the way, as surfers, man. Huntington's awesome. The takeoffs aren't too steep. Always breaks top to bottom, it's awesome. But I used to go to the beach and then hire the notes that a person like you would type. I was the guy paying you the $40,000.
That was the way that's the way I learned, is just typing that stuff out.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so now you're going through school. You got the principal. I'm sure it wasn't as deep. Then what happened, man? Were you a DE guy?
I never got it. No, I never went to DE or anything of that nature. I didn't. No, I didn't. I mean, I listened to the stuff. I mean, I didn't go to DE per se.
Okay, so dude, you got all fired up about, I mean, you are a very principled guy. So where did it really
Yeah.
sink
So you
in?
graduate, then what? What happens
Oh,
then?
okay. So I graduate and I go back to San Diego and I get a preceptorship working for a doctor, thinking, okay, I'm going to work for this doctor for a couple of years and get some experience, like a lot of students get out of
Yeah.
school. And one day, I'm about 6 months into my preceptorship, not licensed yet. I get a letter in the mail, and the letter I get is for a practice for sale. And it's so funny because the doctor who's sending out this letter is a doctor I met through Ron Oberstein's philosophy group. So it just happens to be in the same. So I open the letter up and he's selling his practice. And I have no intentions of buying a practice at this point. I'm still I'm not even licensed yet. So I said, well, I'm very curious. Like if something falls in my lap and it grabs my attention, I just can't let it go. I just cannot let it go. So I went and buy the practice and looked at it and I'm like, wow, this is a really nice place. And one thing led to another. Before I know it, I'm negotiating with the guy. And before I know it, I'm negotiating and I'm like, well, this sounds like a great opportunity. So I go knock on mom and dad's door and say, hey, could I borrow a little bit of money so I can buy this practice? I negotiated a pretty low price. And they helped me out. And literally, I don't have a license yet, but we got a deal. And I said, but I don't buy this practice unless I get my license. And literally the day my license arrives in the mail, I get a license. Hey, you're approved. You're now licensed California. Remember, we take our state boards in California.
Yeah, yeah.
And that afternoon, we sign the contract and I buy the practice. And we do a whopping 1 week transition.
Wow.
1 week later, I'm the owner of a practice. And I'm
Wow.
by
One
myself.
week. Holy shit.
Yeah, he was looking to get out. It was one of these things where this guy was like, "I'm leaving San Diego. We got to get out of here," and whatever
Yeah.
it was, there are reasons. But a week later, so I think that 1 week he saw every patient he had, which was like maybe 75 visits. And the next week, I think I had 30 people on the books, and it was this small little tiny practice at the very beginning, but I was in practice.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
and it started like we got to make it. And I didn't know my ass from my head. I didn't know what I was
Yeah.
doing. Like a young kid out of school, like I had no experience. So, but here I am. Um, I will also say that's not a surprise for me because um, that's generally who I am as a person. I tend to jump in both feet. Like I get my mind into something, I can't let it go, and I just go.
Yeah.
It's probably
You
what.
got a whole video of three guys on this screen that do the same damn
Yeah,
thing.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
probably why all three of us are successful in life. Is
Wait,
that
I
we
need
don't hold back.
wings? Wait, I'm just jumping off the building. I'll figure it out. Ah!
Exactly. I my yes. So and that's probably been the like choosing to become a chiropractor. Like, oh, okay, I'm
Right.
doing it. Like the decision's made, I'm not turning back. Buying the practice, though, no turning back. And the same thing. And then once getting in practice, I had my struggles I don't know if every chiropractor goes through struggles, but I went through a couple years of struggles in practice, literally to the point where I remember picking up the phone and calling my parents saying, like, we need some help. I have no money to live. Like, I'm married, I have a child, I have a money coming in for the practice, but I can't afford my personal life. And we had to humble ourselves and move back in with my mom and dad and live with them for almost a year, 6 months to a year. So we were living with them while I was in practice. Kind of
So how'd you
embarrassing
learn
to
to
have to
build a
do.
practice besides out of desperation?
Yeah. And it was during that time that I finally got some help if you have any friends or engineers or know engineers have this real handicap, and that is they think they can solve all problems themselves. And that was me. And so I finally reached out and got some help.
That's
And
also entrepreneurs, by the way.
yeah, that's entrepreneurs as well. True. And I got some help. And that help I got was basically teaching me how to do a day one, day two properly, how to do care planning, how to enroll patients in care, how to talk to patients about buying care. And that was really needed because in the early 90s when I had this the beginning of my practice, there was this new thing called managed care that
Yeah.
started, right?
Yeah.
Managed care, and I wasn't
Oh, New
part of any.
York. Yeah, we know managed care. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was everywhere. So I was not part of any of the insurance programs, although I wanted to be,
Right.
I couldn't be.
So
And
who'd you get help from?
I got some colleagues. It wasn't any coaches per se. It was
Oh,
colleagues
okay.
of mine that were doing stuff, and I was just picking their brains, taking them out to lunch. And then I remember the local San Diego chiropractic CCA, the California
Yeah,
Chiropractic
yeah.
Association. They had a local meeting where a speaker came in and talked about care plans. It was what was his name? Was it Dr. Clapp?
little did you know what would come out of that one.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
that conversation got me like, oh, there's this whole thing about, it made sense to me to be able to sit down with people and talk about care plans and enroll them in care, etc. And that's where I learned how to do prepays and all of that kind of stuff that our profession does. I first learned doing that stuff. And I got good at it, quite frankly. I got really good at it, where that's where it allowed us to move out of my parents' house and buy our first home and, you know, get our first tastes of success, until a few years of after having some success in practice and building the practice up. Then I had this kind of aha moment. And the aha moment, I had two aha moments. Let me back up. I had two aha moments. One aha moment was I had been in practice long enough now where I had numerous patients who got the big idea of chiropractic. We all have those people, right? That get the big idea. You can see it in their eyes. They get it.
Yeah.
They're enlightened.
But what blew my mind is I had numerous people who got the big idea, and I knew they did, but yet they still dropped out of care. And it blew my mind that they got it, but they still dropped out. And then the analysis in my head, the engineer in my head is like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then I also looked, I said, I have other patients who've been with me for a long time, and I know they don't have the foggiest idea what chiropractic is. Like, I teach them, but you could just see it just doesn't connect with them, right? That it's still not connecting, but you're still here. And it dawned on me, like, you know, this whole notion of teaching what I know about chiropractic, it's important, but it doesn't connect every single person to lifetime care. And it put me on a mission to figure out, like, well, there's got to be something else going on here. The other kind of life-changing realization I had was, so that was around the message of chiropractic. The other thing that struck me is that I had learned to do these prepays and care plans, and I had this experience one week where I had 3 military families who had all prepaid me money. And something happened in the military where they all got it transferred out of San Diego. And as you know, San Diego has a lot of military, and they got transferred. So I had the pleasure of writing about $10,000 of refund checks that week. And like the expression on your face, like, it sucks, right? You don't want to, I mean, the money's there to do it, but I didn't want to do it, right? But I did, right? But it was like I had to look in the mirror and go, well, shit, I'm building a life on false money. I'm building a life of taking on debt and buying a home and all these things. And the money that I'm counting on is really not my money until I render the service. So even though I'm collecting this money, it's really, I'm borrowing money from patients until I render the services. And that was kind of and rocked my core a little bit, because I'm like, well, shit, that's unnerving. And my nature is I tend to be pretty conservative when it comes to the money side of things. I tend to be not a big giant risk taker. So engineer, yeah, whatever you want to call it. And it served me well. Trust me, it served me well over the years. But as a result of that, I'm like, I got to figure out something else. And that's when I kind of stumbled on doing some other things. And that's what led me down to the path of doing monthly payments, which has led me to my company, Chiropractic, today. But it started getting me experimenting. Like, there's got to be a better way. There's always got to be a better way. And what it dawned on me when we talk about lifetime care and actually executing the principle and actually delivering on the message of chiropractic and having people it's one thing to talk about lifetime care. It's another to have people actually doing it and following through. It was when I had started going on these monthly payment programs, quite frankly, that I observed something change in the practice. And that was my retention skyrocketed. That when I put people on care plans and I had them doing a monthly payment, and I analyzed my practice of who are the people really staying with me long time and versus those are not. And the thing that distinguished the long-term clients, the long-term patients versus everybody else, was that the long-term people were all on monthly payments. Versus, it wasn't anything to do with their socioeconomic status. It wasn't anything to do with whether they're a certain age group, or whether they're a parent or a mom or a kid. I did a big analysis of our patient population of what are the common things among the people who've been with me for years and years and years consistently. I don't mean they come in when they feel like it. Like, I told them to come in once a week and they're doing it. Or I'm telling them to come in twice a week and they've been doing it for years. Who are those people? And what they had in common was the way they were paying for their care. That was the only thing statistically they had in common. There were people among that group who got the big idea, and there were people among that group who didn't get the big idea, but they were still seeing me. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as they're seeing me, they're getting the benefits. Whether they understand it or not is another story, but they're still getting it. They're still getting the care. So that's where it really kind of dawned on me, holy shit. It's the monthly payment. It's the fact that they're on this business model, the subscription model, the membership model, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter the name. Those people on that model followed through. That was really kind of like, holy crap. Now, when you combine all of it, they're on a monthly payment, they're on a care plan, they get the big idea. Those are your ideal people. Like that's like, it just blew my mind that it allowed us to have such a high retention. And I know I've shared this with you, Fred. My PVA when I retired from practice in 2011 was just over 300 visits. So we had this extraordinarily high retention with patients, and it was primarily made up of people who had been moved for years and years and years on an automatic monthly payment. And most of them, not all, but most of them had the big idea of what chiropractic was. They understood the value of getting their family adjusted and their kids adjusted, etc. But it was the business model. It's really what it drove it, is that was kind of the foundation that we built all the principles on top of. That was not something I understood. I didn't know that to begin with. It was kind of something we stumbled upon as we're trying these different things to be successful in practice, and then taking a bird's eye view of like asking the questions, what's going on here? Why are these things happening? What's common among the people having this experience versus those? And really doing an analysis of what's happening in the practice. So,
okay, so I have a question.
Yeah.
So, because I know you know a bunch about human behavior and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, why do you think that the people on payments tend to stay longer? What's the psychology behind that?
Yeah.
Person?
So the psychology that gets in the way of people staying with us is the repeated thought of money. The more often your patients think about money, the less often they're going to see us. Well, an automated monthly payment is the least way to think about money, quite frankly. You automate it. It's not a separate bill. You're not asking them to pull out their wallet every time they walk in the office. It's just behind the scenes. So they're not thinking about it. In fact, I interviewed patients, and I remember asking this one patient this question saying, hey, Mary, if I was charging you any different, like you're paying automatically every month, if you were paying every time you came in, how do you think you'd be utilizing your services here? And her facial expression gave it all away. It was like, I would never be able to come in if I had to think about the money every time I came in. Like, and she even went on to say, like, not that paying's a problem, paying's not a problem, but just the thought of doing it over and over, like that's just human behavior. Like, when's the last time you thought about your cell phone bill? Like, if you're automatically paying your cell phone bill every month, when's the last time you thought about it? Like, you probably haven't thought about it in years. And the reason cell phone companies or different companies have you automatically make your payment is because we've all seen the same thing. It greatly reduces the chance of you leaving them. Because if you're physically writing a check for your cell phone bill every month, you're going to be like, well, shit, that's a lot. Let me go shop it around. Let me go see who's better. Let me compare. And if it's not top of mind awareness, you're not thinking about it. So it's not so much, that's what it is. It's really just the repetition thought. And here's the problem with prepays. Let me just, because I'm speaking to an audience right now. I'm going to guess there's a lot of people who are listening to this right now who do prepays. That's their mindset, because that's so common in our profession. And when I get to know doctors well who do prepays, they all eventually confide the same thing to me. I always hear it. And that is their re-sign rate sucks. That they're great at signing people up, but the renewals are just not where they want it to be. They're still losing a lot of the people on the back end. And the reason that is there's two reasons. One is at the end, when the patient's feeling better and you're asking them to make a new financial decision, a new purchase decision, this is one of these principles. It's like this new purchase decision, it gets in the way of them continuing. It's new money you're asking them to spend on something that maybe they're not so wanting to do anymore. Versus if they've been paying a monthly payment all along, and I get to say to my patient, Joe, great news, you're ready for wellness or maintenance, your $400 payment's going down to $150. It's real easy for that patient to accept that lower payment versus a new purchase decision. I said that quick. The psychology being is that if a person is prepaid and they go 6 months, a year, and they haven't paid any money, and now you're going to do a new program, they got to pay again, they have a decision to make. And that decision gets in the way of them continuing. So when we talk about behavioral psychology, one of the things I want to mention is that the principle being is that every time there's a decision a patient has to make, it's an opportunity to lose them.
Right.
Every decision is a place that you can lose people.
When you see, it's truly rare for a person to pay per visit and have retention.
Correct.
That takes an exceptional person, and you'll never have an associate that can do the same thing.
Correct.
Right. And so, I learned, Rick, what was his name? 𝐷𝐵𝐿 was a business.
𝐷𝐵𝐿, yep.
Yeah, he ended up passing away, right? Had pancreatic cancer or something. but his business model, or what he taught, was at least 50% of your business should be on recurring payments.
Yep.
And so I would say in Elite, we want 80 to 90%. And then another great thing that you did is people understood lifestyle from the beginning.
Yes.
And Joe, this is, you know, the same thing, right? The decision they make on day one, and I could get into all the psychology of it, but they get wired emotionally right in their initial experience, and it's wiring into their primitive brain. And so that's the thing, is you got to teach lifestyle right from day one. You understood lifestyle, you were a principled guy. They got it. So the monthly payments, when they know they're invested for the next 30 or 50 years or whatever, they're buying a life, not a program.
Exactly. That's the whole thing, is that when you think of a prepay, and I'm not here to beat up prepays, they have their place. But you think of that as you're buying something. You're going to buy it, consume it, and be done with it. When you enroll in a monthly payment, it implies you're a member of something. It implies you're doing this ongoing. There's a difference in the implication of the business model on the back end. That's now, people can choose to say, I want to pay 6 months of my payments all at once. They can make that decision on their own. So I'll just share that if a doctor wants to do the prepay thing, it's a good option for people. It's just not, it shouldn't be that's what you do for everybody. Because, Joe, if I was asking you to go sell cars on my car lot, and I said to you as a salesperson, every person who walks in the car lot, I need you to get on the prepay for that car, and there's no financing option, you're going to have a really hard time selling cars, because 95% of people who buy a car are buying it based upon a monthly amount they can afford, and you need financing for that. And if I basically say to you, you need to close the deal and sell 100% of those cars as a prepay, you could probably do it, but you're going to learn to be, you got to be the best salesman in the world, right? To do that. Right. And you're got to get people to do something they don't normally do. So in the chiropractic office, if you're in the mindset of, I'm going to get everybody to prepay, you're going with the same mindset of, I got to get people to do something they don't normally do. And if you're going to do that, that's where you got to learn to sell. You also always run the risk of buyer's remorse, that emotion being created. So there's just some challenges that would being, that's the only way you do things. Where prepay really works is you offer the patient some choices. And if they choose to do it, that's their business. Let them choose to do it, because that's the person who walks in the Mercedes dealership and writes a check for the car. They just buy it, right? That's who's going to be that person. But again, I didn't mean to just beat up. I'm not here to beat up prepays. I'm just simply saying, I know the audience that you're speaking to, probably a lot of them are doing it. And just think about it, because if you're struggling with any kind of retention on the back end, that could be the subluxation right there. That itself.
Well, in one of the one-liners, we say anytime their balance comes to zero, they have to make a new decision, right? So on corrective care, we definitely offer 3 options. One is monthly and one's prepay. But the thing is, if you do take prepays, like if they pay for 3 months in advance, every month first of all, we call the corrective part health recovery. And right from day one, man, it's like, no, day one of your life begins after a year. Like, you got to go through 2 phases of correction, once a week for stabilization, 6 months. Then you have day one. That's when your life starts. This is just repairing the damage of 46 years you never took care of your spine and nervous system, right? And so, and also we collect the money for the next phase of care before their balance comes to zero. So, but I do say, once they get to lifestyle, once they get stabilization, everything is monthly.
Yeah.
So just sometimes the initial phase could be a prepay, but if you're not preparing that and going over it every 30 days, you're exactly right. They're going to quit. And if they don't understand that day one, they're investing in the next 30 to 50 years, which is why we go over their 20 and 30-year health and life goals. I got that from Tony Robbins. If you're not doing that stuff, then what you're saying about prepays is like 90% all the time. Their balance comes to zero. They're not going to continue.
Yeah, it happens. It happens.
So now you have thousands of doctors. So what prompted you to start cash practice? So here you are, notice this trend.
So initially, there was no intention of starting a company called Cash Practice. Initially, it was, okay, I'm having some success doing care planning. I'm having some success with these monthly payments. I need to make this easier, because it was a very manual process back then. This is the late 90s, early 2000s. There's no software to do any of this stuff. So I'm like, well, I have an engineering background. I know how to write software, so let me write something for myself. So I created some software initially to create care planning, and that's all it did was create care plans. Nothing to do with payment processing or anything like that. And it was a very effective tool. And so picture 1998, eBay is this new thing. Nobody heard of eBay before. Nobody knows what an email address is. The internet's brand new. That's the world we're living in, right? 1998, 1999. And I decide I would love to, just for fun, sell something on eBay because there's this new thing and I'm buying things on eBay and I'm having a good time. So I decided to sell some of my software on eBay. And I did, and a couple hundred chiropractors bought it. I remember doing like $10,000 of sales back like in 1 month doing a bunch of software sales. And I'm like, well, this is cool. And I got a bunch of feedback, some testimonials from the doctors, and the feedback was consistently very similar. This is the best thing since sliced bread. It's so easy to sign up patients for care, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, well, holy shit, I might be onto something here. I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I've always been one. I've never, my professional life worked for anybody else. And I decided, well, I want to turn this into something. So I stopped selling that software immediately because I knew if I kept selling it, it was very easy for people to copy it and just give it to friends. So it wasn't anything super fancy. So I stopped selling it and I went on and said, well, there's got to be a way to make a program on the internet. And the internet's brand new back then. You got to remember the internet was nothing more than yellow page ads, right? It was web pages, just advertising, spinning balls and, spinning, it was just brand new. You remember about Yahoo, it was just brand new. There was no software. And the only reason I thought about the internet back then was simply, I was like, well, if I start writing software, I don't want to be the business of sending floppy disks out to people to update things. I was like that. I had no desire for anything like that. I knew that world well from my engineering days, but I had no desire for that. So I said, there's got to be a way to program. There's got to be a way to do something on the internet. And I went and checked out a book. I got a book on programming for the internet. And I have a background in software development, so I knew how to do this. And I started writing the initial versions of Cash Practice software for the internet. Again, this is like 1980, 1999, around 2000, right around then. And within about a month, I had the first version of Cash Practice built, which was just simply a very simple tool for building care plans. And I went back to the doctors who originally bought the original one. And I said, hey, I have a new better version and it has all these new features and it's so much better to use. And you can get it for $27 a month back then. This was the first, software online that one of the first softwares. And I launched it and very quickly started getting a couple dozen, 50, 100. I remember my big break. My real big break came when Bob Hoffman of the Master Circle got wind of what we were doing. And if you remember Bob Hoffman, he used to teach a thing called UCAF, Unlimited Care to Fixed Fee, which is basically a care plan. And when he saw what we were doing, he came to me and he said, Miles, I surrender. Your program is so much better than what we're offering. I want our members using it. And he brought me on stage in front of a couple thousand doctors. And he basically said on stage, Miles, I surrender. Everybody should be using your program. And that quickly launched us to getting, a couple hundred doctors using the program. And from there, we started developing payment processing and email marketing and our wellness score and other tools that we found important for the practice. And that's how it started. It was me building stuff for myself and then just kind of fun letting other people use it and then realizing there was a market for this and then growing it from, and being the entrepreneur, taking it like, okay, well, let's see if we can take this to another level.
Okay, well, first of all, here's my first impression. You're way smarter than Joe and I, because Joe's sitting there with his hand on his chin, thinking about the eggplant parmesan sandwich. So we're like way simpler than that, man. You're talking floppy disk and software programming.
But that's how it started. I mean,
Joe's like, I really like that Italian sausage head for breakfast.
I was actually laughing because he put everybody on a membership plan as the chiropractor to pay for the service.
Yeah.
That's where my head was going. I go, this is great. Yeah. He's getting all the chiropractors on a care plan. I love it.
Pretty much. It's funny because Cash Practice, it's pretty much run like a chiropractic clinic. I mean, we market similarly, we charge similarly, we provide a service. It's very similar in nature.
Yeah.
That's like a long-term.
That's where my head was going. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So you may stay in coaching more than 3 years, Joe. Well, I could actually make this work.
That's funny.
I'm just teasing. Cool,
By the way,
man.
these are great questions you're asking, and of course, it's always fun to talk about your own story and what do they say everybody's favorite subject is themselves or their, whatever. So it's very kind of you to ask the questions.
Well,
Um, I'll just share real quick. If anybody's interested, we actually did a movie back in 2019. If you haven't seen it, either of you guys as well, you go to 𝐃𝐨𝐵𝐞.com, 𝐃𝐃𝐨𝐵𝐞.com, and it's a story about being called to serve as a chiropractor. It's my story. But we hired actors, we hired a production company to like it's a real legit movie. With a script and everything. So if you want to be inspired, it's a great story of the
Yeah.
being called to serve as a chiropractor. It has a great story of a patient, their recovery. It has a great story of a CA finding her calling in chiropractic. Yeah, so if you want to watch it, go to 𝐃𝐨𝐵𝐞.com and you can stream it for free.
Yeah.
cool, man. Well, here's also, when you look at your whole story and you kind of put it into a principle, if you like. I mean, and Joe and I are the same, right? How do we develop businesses? Like, Joe, did you ever think, well, I want to coach chiropractors? No,
No.
what you had to do was you had to solve your own freaking problems. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden you solved them on such a great level that you noticed, like I expected chiropractors at my new patient workshop every week
Yes.
because people are like, dude, what are you doing? Like we didn't develop this because I want to be a coach. No, I used to
Right.
look at
Right.
those ads in the journals, be like, fuck those. I don't want to do any. Like, I would never do that. And then it's like you, Miles, you solve a problem and then you realize, oh my God, man, the profession needs this.
Yeah.
And it's like a whole nother purpose. And that's what I always say. You're supposed to solve the purpose. You're supposed to reach your vision in practice because there's something bigger that's waiting.
For sure.
But
For
it won't
sure.
fall in your lap until you get this step down. So there you go. You just made everything easy. I know we got a bunch of people more. I got to get more people in Elite into cash practice.
I appreciate that. Yeah, for sure. And they'll appreciate it too. Our doctors, I'm sure you both have clients of yours who've been with you for a long time and they can give you great accolades about how you've helped them grow. Absolutely 100%. Same thing with our patients. We have patients who've been with us forever who give us accolades. And I'm very proud of the fact that at Cash Practice, same thing. We have case study after case study of doctors who, if you look at their and we're looking at revenue, right? Because we're helping them with their business side of things and their growth of their revenue. And practice after practice that we're seeing that goes from $200,000 a year of collections a decade later are routinely doing 2 million a year in collections by applying these principles. Now, I'll also say I'm not saying cash practice deserves 100% of the credit of their growth. There are certainly things they're doing outside of cash practice that facilitates their growth, but that's all built on the engine of the idea of putting people on care plans and doing the recurring payments and doing the model, the business model. Of course, they're applying their own principles and their own business savvy on top of that. But case after case of offices growing like this. And it's not uncommon to see our doctors doing 15 to 23% annual growth year after year, decades plus. Like, meaning they don't just do that their first couple of years. A decade later, they're still growing.
Well, plus
Right.
you have patient retention traiing in cash practice,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
Because
we have
that's what they
training.
need, right? I mean, cash payments are great and it helps when they get it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean everything about Cash Practice. If I was to name, the only reason I named the company Cash Practice back then, by the way, is simply because I thought it was a cool name. It was all about we were doing cash at the time, like all right, oh, and I was shocked the name was still available, so I took it. But if I was naming it today, it would probably be more something around the world of retention. That's really what we're all about, is helping you retain your patients. Cash is just kind of a side effect of that. It's not really the purpose of what we do. We have plenty of offices. In fact, a good portion of them are still doing insurance as part of what they do. It's not, they have to be cash only, but it's really you're right. It's all about retention is what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the magic of a practice, and that's the fun of it. We were sharing a story. I
That's
don't
the
know.
ease of it.
Yeah, one of the moments, and I think we've all had something like that, but when I started figuring it out, because I had to borrow parents' money from my parents too, Miles, but it's not fun borrowing from Italians because Uncle Vito shows up if you're late on a payment, with a
Doesn't matter
violin
your
case,
family.
but it ain't a violin, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, and then when you started figuring it out, I noticed it was Christmas and we started getting presents and gifts, just I mean, a massive amount. It wasn't like 5 Christmas cards. It was hundreds of cards and hundreds of cookies and candy. And you started to realize, wow, I'm in relationships with people because I'm part of their life now. I'm part of that lifestyle, and that was one of those moments I had in my practice where we knew something was going on. You almost didn't know what you were shooting for directly, or what the result was, because you thought it was just you were going to see more people, but there was that other level of connection with people that started to happen. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, and then when you're taking care of those people's kids, and then
Yes.
their kids, and
Yes.
all of that stuff, it's
Amazing.
a very I don't want to call it rewarding life. It's a very
Fulfilling.
fulfilling. Yeah, that's the word. Fulfilling. It is rewarding, but I don't know of another career you get to lay your hands on people, impact them, and see immediate response with some people. Like that
Yes.
feeling
Yeah.
of being able to it's not like, here, do this and then you'll see results years later. Although
Yes.
I know it's long-term results, but we all know the power of a single adjustment.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yeah.
people step off that table like, wow, that was amazing, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know, like single adjustment, like, I have a lot of CBP docs, but and sometimes CBP, they get so involved in changing the curves, they forget about the power of one adjustment.
Yeah.
How many blind eyes, one adjustment,
Right.
deaf ears. I remember like when you say, all the cards and stuff like that. And then immediately what came to mind is this woman and her son had AIDS and they sent him home to die on Friday. And the guy looked like an Auschwitz victim with his chemo bubble, and they said, you're going to be dead by Monday. And she brought him in. You know what I mean? Like that's the principle. We pulled the chemo bubble out, told him to start eating, x-rayed him, adjusted him, and he lived for 2 years. And then he quit coming in, and 6 months later he died.
Wow.
And he sent in so many AIDS patients. He became famous in the AIDS community, And these guys would come in with Kaposi sarcoma, like blue cauliflower on their skin. And I would literally start adjusting them, and you'd watch it flake off. Gone. And they would bring in their T-cell blood tests.
Yeah.
Normal. And they'd go to their MD. I got into chiropractic care. Oh, well, spontaneous remission. Yeah, I was dying. And now I have normal T-cell counts. And I only changed one thing. Well, two things. I quit taking your drugs and I started getting adjusted.
Yeah. Great study on that, by the way. C4 T killer cells. It wasn't a large study,
absolutely.
but yeah.
Yep. The thymus turns on, man.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's, freaking, I think people really don't understand the power. You're working with God's principle, God's life force. You're working with life force has to get to matter, man. And you don't have to change a curve to have a miracle. You just, it's like what Gonstead or Fred Barge, right? Find it, move it, leave it alone, let God do the healing.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, that is what's doing the healing, right? Because like I said, we don't adjust dead people because there's no vital force, there's no vital, energy. So what animates the tissue? So if it makes sense that what that expression is makes them more alive, if less of it's there, they're less alive. So why not live a life more alive? It's not
There's the Borio patient education system.
Right. Well, straighter's better than crooked.
No,
straighter
right,
feels better. Straighter, sexier.
it.
Straighter looks better. Let's be honest. I mean, this doesn't look good. Like, this looks better. I mean, let's not make it complicated.
You say that. My patient education class, and it was simply, Joe, you get adjusted to stay healthy. I'll see you next week. That was
exactly.
We kept it really
exactly.
Which was, if any of you listening right now struggle with this, because as an engineering background, we tend to be very analytical people, and we want to educate, we want to talk, we want to know how things work, and we assume everybody else wants that too. And
that's why you had to borrow money after the first couple months.
Yeah, right. So learning eventually to shut your mouth and just okay, I got to just keep it simple. I got to talk benefits, not how it works, but why, just keep it really simple. And if someone asks me, well, Miles, how does it keep you healthy? I said, well, it's really easy. It keeps your immune system strong. So there you go. Just kept it really simple. And no, not to say you can't go any more complicated, but simple is best. Simple message is best. And
absolutely.
If the engineer, we were just talking about that in one of our calls. There's the there's three, and this dates us, but if you're a Star Trekker, right, you got Captain Kirk, right? And then
Right.
so he's the guy that's going to tell you what he wants to do, right? And then you got Bones, that's the emotional patient. And
Yep.
then you got Spock, which is you, Miles, that's the engineer, right? So you got to kind of know how to navigate each of those people. There's a little different nuance.
Absolutely.
But in the end, some people be there, like you're saying, well, the engineer is going to need to know it at a little different level. Emotional person needs to be, consoled, reassured.
Yep.
And then the Captain Kirk's got to be educated to the point where he comes up with the decision. There's a different way to handle each of those. But yeah, in the end, it's simple. We would say, it's good for you. Getting adjusted is good for you. It doesn't have to, I'm not saying it can't cure phenomenal things, right, by removing that interference, but in the end, I'm going to have people come in that are so-called outwardly well. Why should they come in? Because it's good for you. Why do you go to the gym? Why do you brush your teeth? Because you got tooth decay, or do you brush it? So it can be really good for you without having to cure some monumental, disease, as important as that may be too. And that's why you come for the rest of your life, because it's good for you.
That's good for you.
Hey, I got to rock, and we got to end this. So real quick, Miles, any quick last things you want to leave them with?
Just keep. Here's what I would say. You want to be authentic with your patients. You want to tell the truth. And when I say I'll tell them the truth, that means if you feel like they need care, give them a care plan. So many doctors are afraid to give care plans. They're afraid to tell people it's going to take 6 months, 8 months, a year. You got to get over that fear, and you got to be able to confront people. Not necessarily confront. You need to be able to share the truth with people and not let that get in the way. Oftentimes people ask, well, how do we learn more, etc. Let me just share this. If you want to learn more about our company, just go to 𝐾𝐲practice.com/success. 𝐾𝐲practice.com/success. If you want to watch that movie, go to thecallingmovie.com. And that's my story that I'm sticking to.
Awesome.
There you go.
Sure.
Awesome,
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks so much for taking the
Honor.
time. And hang on one sec. All right, guys, we'll be back. Love you guys. Peace. Subscribe, share, and take these one-liners and thoughts and beliefs, put them in your practice, because I guarantee you there was a bunch of gold that was in one-liners that was given out today. So love you guys. Peace.
Awesome, guys.